Welcome to this edition of 22nd Century Management with Ken. If you're listening on a podcast or if you're watching it on YouTube, do me a favor and either follow or hit the like and subscribe. I will tell you that if you have any questions for Michael, put them in the comments and I'll reach out to him and we'll get you the answers you're looking for. And with me on the show today, I have Michael Seaver. He's an award-winning executive coach, a leadership consultant, and a keynote speaker. He's on a mission to unlock human potential to help people uncover and live their purpose. Michael's a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and is a contributor to Forbes, Thrive Global, Medium.com, Phoenix Business Journal, and more. His book, I Know, A Practical Guide for Awakening to What's Within and Finding Work-Life Integration, is available in print, ebook, and audiobook at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Google, and other retailers. I had a little trouble getting that title in those locations out, but you got a lot of accomplishments. Tell us a little more about yourself, Michael.
Thank you so much, Ken, for having me. And the book title is a bit lengthy. I agree. Like you said, I'm an executive coach. I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was raised in a really small town in West Michigan. And about 17 years ago, I left West Michigan to come to Phoenix and worked in the hospitality industry for 4 or 5 years, which was awesome. I learned an awful lot about how to provide really, really great service to folks. And then in 2008, I went to the Thunderbird School of Global Management. And for a couple of years, I got an MBA, which was a tremendous experience for me because of being able to travel internationally. And I learned to speak Mandarin Chinese. But really 2008, 2009 was a really critical point in my life because I was able to realize that my life's work was about coaching. And so that was kind of the start of me becoming a coach. So in 2011, I decided to start my business and slowly built it to the point where in 2015, I was actually able to work in my business full time. So since 2015, I've been serving as a career or executive coach for individuals or for organizations and have helped in a variety of ways, right? So anything from resume writing and production and interview help, all the way up to using certain things like DISC assessments, which I think we'll talk a little bit about today, and to really help people understand themselves in a new way. Been spending a lot of time the last couple of years working on organizational culture and really helping organizations go through change and do it safely and do it well. So I feel very blessed that this last couple of years have given me some chances to help organizations and groups at bigger scale, and have also helped me with the right information and the right stories that are featured in the book, I Know. And so today, I'm very blessed to be on the precipice of being able to launch a book club based on the book and being able to help people at scale that I hadn't in the last couple of years. And so I'm really thankful that the stars have aligned the way that they have and that I've had the experiences and had the opportunities to coach and consult and help. It's been such a blessing, and I'm really thankful.
Well, it's great to have you here, and you've got a lot of exciting things going on, I'm sure.
Yes.
So you've been a career and executive coach since 2011. From your experience, what are the 5 tools that come together to create memorable leadership brands?
Yeah, I was pretty bad at this back in 2011, 2012, 2013, but I think as society has advanced and developed for me, I'm an introvert and I'm really task oriented. So I look for patterns. I look for information, right? I look for a really tactical, logical, linear way to get things done. And so as I was going through the process of helping executives define their brand, I started to think about both the right and the left side of the brain, trying to understand how do we appeal to the emotional kind of irrational side of the brain, but how do we also appeal to this logical, more linear side of the brain? And so what I started to do was crash together 5 different things. And the first thing is the DISC assessment. So maybe people that are listening or watching have done the DISC or Myers-Briggs or Emergenetics or the Predictive Index or Enneagram. There's a lot of personality assessments that are out there. So there's many that we can pull from. But the DISC is important because it really focuses on our observable behavior. Now, the second piece is what the company that I use is called the 12 driving forces. And it's really about these underlying motivators that we all have. So number 1 is DISC. It's our observable behavior. It's how we show up in the world. But number 2 is our motivators, right? These kind of subconscious things that guide our choices. And now the third thing is our core values. And so there's a number of activities that I use with the people to help them understand what their core values are. And our society just really doesn't talk about values much in that way. So I'm glad that I have some resources that I'll talk about in a second that really do help with that help us understand what our core values are. Now, the fourth piece is a kind of a 10-question Q&A that I developed over the years that really helps people to see some of the challenges and the hardships that they went through in their younger years and how they can then help others overcome those same challenges for themselves. And in the fifth piece, and this is a hard one because we live in a pretty humble society, is that I really want people to talk about what their authority is, right? What their strengths are, the things that they're great at, the wins that they've had. And so if we can find those 5 things and we can get those 5 things about a person, we can find some patterns across all 5 of those things. And then based on that material, we can now find a way to write the individual's personal mission statement, know what their top 5 or 6 core values are, come up with like a unique value or selling proposition for them as a person, and then design the right goals that help them accomplish those things, right? That help them really exude that leadership brand out in the world.
So in that process, why are personality inventories such as the DISC so valuable in designing your leadership brand?
Sure. You know, that I was doing a webinar yesterday for a group, and it really reminded me that we've been like psychologists in the late 1800s and early 1900s have been studying the psychology of communication and how we show up in the world. And so I'm certified to use the DISC assessment, which comes from an organization in North Scottsdale, Arizona called Target Training International, or TTISI. And they have been paying attention to and following and using the research from a guy named William Moulton Marston, who wrote a book called Emotions of Normal People, and he published it back in 1928. So for basically 100 years, right, we've been, as a human species, been tracking the psychology of behavior and understanding psychology and how do we show up in the world. So what I love about the DISC is that it's really based on validated neuroscience, right? It helps us to see ourselves from a third party in a really unemotional, objective light. And the great thing about the DISC is, as I mentioned a second ago, it's our observable behavior. It's the words that we choose, it's the tone of our voice, it's the body language that we exude, right? It's the persona that we have, right? This brand that we have when we interact with others. It's the first impression oftentimes that we make. But what I love about the DISC is that it helps us to increase our self-awareness. It helps us to choose where to spend time on the right goals, right? The right purpose to find that happiness for us. What I've found through all of these years is that when people understand what their communication preferences are and how they show up in the world, all of a sudden others start to follow them, start to pay attention to them, and their influence and their brand starts to grow, right? So the more that we know our own style and learn our own behavioral patterns through the DISC, the better that we can then figure out a way to learn others and their style. So as we tailor our communication to other styles, it helps us build our leadership brand because we become more influential, right? We're able to share our message with people in a way that they can hear it and really understand it. So it really is a key component of how we show up in the world and how others perceive us and how people start to recognize and interact with what our leadership brand is.
Very nice. So how does knowing what motivates you guide where you invest your time?
Yeah, this one's a little bit harder, right? Because not everybody has done assessments around what's called the 12 driving forces or those things that motivate us. And so people really have to want to get to that point of self-discovery to know what their motivators are, right? So TTI, where I'm certified, the 12 driving forces, right? They take these 12 driving forces and they break them into 3 buckets of 4. And so I focus in on the top 4 motivators. And those are really important because the more that we recognize what these top 4 motivators are for us, it really does help us to know where we're going to distribute time. And so these motivators, they're kind of an unconscious or a subconscious driver, motivator, guider of our behavior, if you will. And oftentimes when I'm working with clients, they don't even realize how their motivators are guiding their choices, right? So we want to get to the point of self-awareness and understanding to know how these motivators are guiding the decisions and the tough choices that we make. So as an example, one of the motivators is called resourcefulness, right? And it's very much about people spending time and giving effort into things that give them some sort of return on investment, or they get to do a process really efficiently, or they make money or produce wealth. That's a motivator for resourcefulness. So when people are put into roles that allow for them to make money or to be efficient or to drive ROI for their time, they're going to be heavily motivated and happy. But if they take a job or a position where they're not allowed to be those things day to day or do those things day to day, they're going to be disengaged and unhappy, right? And that's what we want to avoid and want to get away from that. Now, another one that I'll give an example of is something called commanding. So a person who's motivated by commanding, they really like to have control over their own destiny, right? Control where they distribute time. And that's really important to them. So if they were to take a job when they were working for a micromanaging boss, that would be a really hard environment for them. So we want to make sure that we are aligning the things that motivate us with our workplace or with the places that we spend time. Because if we do that, we're going to be more full of joy, we're going to be happier, we're going to be more engaged, we're going to be more productive. And the way that I like to see this is that it almost creates like an upward spiral of success. So the more times that we have to be able to do the things that we desire, the more opportunities we're going to have for happiness and joy.
Okay. So what is a resource and process for discovering someone's core values?
Yeah, the third piece of my puzzle, if you will, core values. And so in Metro Phoenix, and they have another office up in Portland, Oregon, but I've met and become friends with Brian and Jen, who have a company called Peak Values, or the Peak Fleet. And so if you go to thepeakfleet.com, they have two things that I think are really helpful, and I've used both. So pre-pandemic, I was using an awful lot of their core values cards. And so they have these 55 core values cards, and they have a really defined activity that I, as a coach, could put somebody through to make sure that a person was recognizing of these 55 core values, which were the top 5 or 6 that were the most important for them. Then as the pandemic hit in March of last year, about a year ago, they shifted and were able to create an online activity where people could pay a small amount of money, maybe $5-10, and be able to complete the core values activity for themselves on their webpage. So what's really important about that is that there really aren't a lot of places in American education, K through 12 or others, where we're taught or understand or be able to spend time knowing what our core values are. So similar to motivators, right? The more opportunities we have to live our core values, the happier we're going to be. And one of the ways that I've helped clients across the world with this is that after they've identified what their top 5 or 6 values are, I've had them do one of two things. Number one was they could do a brainstorming activity that where they would just on the left-hand side of a sheet of paper, they would write what their top 5 or 6 core values are. And then on the right-hand side, I just wanted them to just brain dump any idea that they had for living that core value more, right? So if they weren't living it a large percentage of their day, I wanted them to find ways to be able to live it more. And so that could be a fun activity for people that are viewing this or listening to this. Say, hey, know what your core values are, brainstorm some ways to be able to do that thing more so that you can be happier day to day to day. Now, the second thing with the core values activity is that it can help with employee engagement. And so if you're leading an organization and you want to be able to find a way to engage your team members more deeply, what we can do is we can take that person's individual personal core values and we can take your organization's core values and we can put them side by side. And if we can see a link or a connection between the person's core values and the organization's core values, now we can create higher levels of employee engagement because the employee is going to feel an emotional connection to wanting to work inside your company. And that's critical for productivity and accountability. So that could be another activity that could help someone. So the peakfleet.com or using the Peak Values cards or the Peak Online activity help us to first know what it is that we really value, but then we can come up with some other activities to make sure that the person is brainstorming ways to live their core values more, or as a leader, helping you to engage your team more deeply by connecting the person's core values to your company's core values.
Okay. So can you define and share examples of knowing your authority?
Sure. Yeah, the authority is a hard thing. I think I mentioned it a second ago when we talk about humility and being humble. Even in my brief conversations with you so far, Ken, I can sense the humility in who you are, even though you have a lot of influence. So it's hard, right, to talk about those things. But what I see when I'm working with folks, and it just doesn't really matter so much where I'm working with a person across the world, there's still this continual struggle for people to look at themselves objectively, right? Where there's that humility and that humbleness that happens. So helping people to understand who they really are and really helping them to see how capable they are is really important to me because there were so many factions of my life when I was not allowed to do that. I wasn't doing that. So an authority or creating a list of what those authority things might be for you is really as simple as just sitting down, snagging a piece of paper, opening up a Word document in your computer, and really thinking back to the last 5-10 years, whatever it is for you, saying, what are the major accomplishments that I've had, right? What are the awards that I've won? What are the big wins that have occurred for me? What recognitions have I received from my family, friends at work or in the community? Have I published specific pieces in the media? Have I gotten certain degrees from accredited institutions, right? Are there certifications that I've garnered from professional associations and organizations? Have I served on a particular board of directors or volunteered with a great not-for-profit that I'm really proud of. Maybe it's a particular life experience, like speaking a second language or traveling to certain countries around the world, or maybe it's what are the businesses that you built and bought and sold? So our authority can be any number of those things or any combination of those things, but it's just really important that we take the time to really sit down and think about them. And if you're struggling with that, doing it alone, don't be afraid to reach out to some of those people that you used to work with or maybe that are in your life today, and make sure that you make that list as long as you possibly can make it, because it'll help to see the impact that you've made on the people around you.
Okay. In chapter 4 of your book, I Know, you offer insights into the purpose of a personal mission statement. How can our listeners use this statement to accomplish their goals?
Yeah, thank you. My mission is to unlock human potential through the development of personal and professional well-being. And in chapter 4 of the book, I list a number of other examples of personal mission statements. And this is one of those outcomes from those 5 pieces that we just talked about a minute ago, Ken, that it really does matter that you collect all this data about yourself, you find the patterns, and then you got to come up with some way to share that with the world. So for me, having a personal mission statement is kind of akin to an organization's mission statement, right? It's the why, it's what makes the organization or the person different. It's what makes you unique. It could be your life's purpose in one sentence. Maybe it's how you better others around you. But the way that I try to design a mission statement is it's one sentence. It's really easy to repeat. And anybody who hears it really understands it simply, right? We want to make it simple to understand. So what I think about when I'm designing someone's personal mission is when they're confronted in the future by really tough choices, right, where they're being given options and they don't really know what path to choose, I want them to be able to look at their personal mission statement and say, does this choice align with my mission? And if so, it's going to create more joy, more happiness, more engagement, more productivity. But if the choice and there's the feeling that says, no, this doesn't align with my mission, then that's something that we should not do, right? We should not do those things. We should avoid them. So I help people to design 3 types of goals: personal goals, professional goals, and relationship goals. And so each of those goals should be designed in such a way that they help you live your personal mission more. And that to me is key, right? We can set lots of goals. People are great at setting goals, but if it's in alignment with your mission and we have the right daily habits in support of that, we're much more likely to find value and happiness inside living that mission.
Okay, so you mentioned having goals and personal goals. So what's a great format for writing goals and remaining accountable to them?
Yeah. One of my favorite books for the last probably 6-7 years, it's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution by Chris McChesney out of Franklin Covey. And they do a great job of helping us understand the actual accomplishment of goals. And the format that Chris talks about in the book is called From X to Y by When. And so X is some sort of a metric-driven current state. Y is a metric-driven future state, and when is the date by which you're going to accomplish it. And so whenever I'm helping a client set the personal, professional, or relationship goals, I always make sure that it's metrics-driven, that it's objective, and that it's unequivocally easy to understand, did the person achieve it or not? And so placing your goals from X to Y by when helps you to make sure that you're doing what it is that you said you're going to do and really living that mission. So after we set the goals, the thing that's really going to help tremendously, and one of the guys that I follow on social media and get his email distribution is a guy named James Clear. And he wrote a book last year called Atomic Habits. And it's a great book. It's a great treatise. He's got a planner and some other things around it. But what I love about James's message, whether through his e-newsletter or through his book, is all accomplishment, all success is in the small things that we do day to day, right? Our success comes from those daily and weekly habits. And so can we remain committed to those things? So when we set that from X to Y by when goal, we automatically have to come up with like 3 different metrics that if we know we do these things every single week, that the goal is automatically going to happen. Right? So we set the goal and then we set 3 little metrics driven tasks that we need to do each week to make sure that the goal occurs. So the daily and the weekly habits, if we do them well and we accomplish them, the likelihood is that we're then going to have a little bit more time, hopefully, for journaling and for reflection to make sure that we're actually making progress on the things that we desire to. And what I love about that is it gives us a chance to catalog some of our wins. It helps us see the progress that we've made. It helps us add to our authority list. But really, at the end of the day, it helps us feel accomplished, right? Because we know we set a goal, we devoted the right time week to week to week to make it happen, and then it happened.
I agree so much with that. The feeling of accomplishing a significant, worthwhile goal is just amazing, and it kind of fuels your engine. And it's when we don't have goals, or when we set goals that either aren't worthwhile, or we set goals that we don't reach, that it starts to wear down on us and kind of grinds away at us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right, Ken. That's where the disengagement or the unhappiness, or in some cases, sadness or depression, or, just being tired, those things kind of start to creep in. And so it's really important that we surround ourselves with uplifting and important people, but also then we have to, take responsibility and ownership of our lives and really make sure that we're doing the stuff day to day that helps us to feel accomplished. It matters tremendously.
Okay, so can you share examples of ways you've seen leaders live their personal brand?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because so many people that ask me this or want to know about this is that they want there to be like an easy way to emulate for themselves. And I don't want that to occur, right? I don't want someone to emulate someone else. I think Earth has moved from a place of us believing that someone else has the answers to now we can really authentically believe that we have the answers inside ourselves, right? And that's what I try to talk about in the book. So I've had some people, when they've designed their personal brand, they've gotten tattoos, or I've got some people when they designed their personal brand, they wore specific types of jewelry, and that reminded them of their brand and their mission. And it was a key piece of the journey for them. One of the clients that I worked with a number of years ago named Dan, his mission was built upon adventure, right? He really liked the idea of adventure. So what he did personally is that he would take his camper and his girlfriend, and they would go out into the woods and they would camp, and he would take videos of it, share them on YouTube. And then he built a following of people who wanted to have similar types of adventures. But the thing that he did internal to his organization is that he kept using language and kept reminding his employees that they were on a career adventure. And so it was really interesting for him to not only integrate the idea of adventure into his personal mission, the camping videos that he created, but also the things that he did with his employees at work. Or another client that I worked with back in 2017, 2018, a guy named Scott, CFO for some businesses in Metro Phoenix. When he was a youngster, economic empowerment was a really big part of his journey, became a big part of his mission. So he ended up becoming a board member for Goodwill of Northern and Central Arizona. And now today he gives a lot of time to students to help them with finance stuff, right? Help them get the right budget set in place, get the right habits set in place so that they can feel economically empowered in living their life in their own way. Or Sherry, public relations pro that I've partnered with for quite some time. I'm really proud of her. She, for quite a bit of time, she realized that her life's work was about helping others use their voice, right? So she's a public relations agent and owner and pro. And so what I love about her is that not only does she tell her story authentically through her brand, through her website, through social media channels, but it's also her work to help others tell and share their stories, right? That's what she does all day. And me, right, I shared it just a little bit about what my mission is, that in those younger years in West Michigan, working in the family's landscaping and lawn maintenance company, my grandfather and father really had a specific way that they wanted to run the business, how they wanted employees to behave. And I just really wasn't on board with that. But I worked there for 12 years, but I was kind of a robot inside that business. And it was really challenging for me. So when I was able to come to Metro Phoenix, 2003, 2004, I started to go through this process of what was the authentic version of Michael, right? And how did I live that? How do I go through and live that in my own way? So it's no coincidence that my mission is about unlocking potential, and that I'm in the business of constantly living authentic life. And so I get to do that through a number of ways, through the material that I share on my website, through clothing and hats that say my name on them to try to encourage people to really share themselves. The logo of my business is my signature intentionally, right? Because I want people to see the authenticity. So there's any number of ways that people can live their personal brand or their leadership brand. The key is really making it authentic and not having to do what everybody else does in society, right? We don't have to follow someone else's lead. We can kind of create our own way. And that's what I really want people to take away from is there's lots of examples, lots of ways to live our brand, but do it in the way that's most meaningful to you.
Well, I really appreciate you being on today, Michael. I've enjoyed our conversation. And for folks that want to find your book, I'm just going to call it I Know. You can find it, as I mentioned, on Amazon. Oh, there we go. Big title, I Know. Lots of little words under it there. Anyway, you can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, Google. And what I'm going to do for everybody is I will put a link to his book on Amazon in the comments and in the show notes so you can find it quick and easy. I have a feeling it's a great read and that you'll benefit from taking a look at it. Again, thanks for being here today, Michael.
It is my pleasure, Ken. Thank you so much for your time.
And again, for everybody that listened to the podcast, watch the YouTube video, if you haven't already done so, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. That way you'll get notified of my next video, and we'll see you next week.